Hello, you lovely listeners. I'm Amy. Welcome to the Really Good Conversations podcast, where we will delve into the minds of the business people we have met in the process of launching our first card game. We will be uncovering their secrets to success, their biggest mistakes, and sharing the key lessons they have picked up en route. So, if you're looking for an engaging chinwag mixed with business insights and a good pinch of fun, you're in the right place. Let's have a really good conversation. Welcome to the Really Good Conversations podcast. As we mark 2 years of this podcast, I wanted to invite today's special guest for a chat. Today I'm joined by Gosia Lapinski, who is the brilliant podcast editor who helps shape every episode you listen to. She's also a multidisciplinary creative with a background in art, design, and language teaching. Welcome to the podcast, Gosia.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And this is certainly a different one because people may not realise that, yes, I'm the face of the podcast, have the conversations, do a lot of the planning work and promotion, but you are by my side when it comes to the actual editing and making it sound like a decent recording. So I thought that would just be a great opportunity to get you on.
Yeah, thank you.
So firstly, tell our listeners a little bit about your creative background, because as I touched on in our intro, you have quite a broad range of skills. So you're not just a podcast editor. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I did actually digital design for about 17 years. And actually before that, it's a varied path. I studied psychology. Before that, I was painting. But yeah, digital design was that was my main creative outlet for a really long time. And I really loved it. And there was quite a bit of animation editing and video editing in that. Yeah, and that's kind of how I ended up doing podcast editing. But I've always been an artist on the side. So art's always been a big part of my life. And that's involved video stuff too. So I do animation there as well, and public art installations and drawing, painting, all kinds of things.
Fab. And when did the language teaching come into your world?
Yes, so I kind of decided to leave the digital design world for the most part and just to keep doing the things I really love, which is, editing is a thing I do really enjoy. But I wanted to do a lot more art stuff, so I left the country and I moved to Poland and I started teaching there just to support myself. And I discovered that I absolutely loved it. Like, it was a really, really big part of my life. I'm bilingual, so I speak Polish, so it really helped me connect with people there. And it just took off and I'm still doing that.
That's great. And I thought today, before we get into some of the behind the scenes of the podcast and what you do behind the scenes, we could talk about some of that language teaching a little bit more, because what has been really interesting as we have worked on this podcast together, there's a number of times when you have given some direction and feedback on the actual, communication of people and some of the language structure, or if we're editing things, where you can't cut in certain places because of the way that people actually speak. So how has teaching different languages shaped the way you think about communication more broadly?
Intonation's a really big thing. So I only really started teaching that well into, you start teaching grammar and, structure and sort of, I guess, trying to get people fluent. But I realized after a while that people started coming to me for pronunciation and intonation. It's a really, really big part of speaking. And I realized that actually feeds into editing quite a bit, because you realize, for example, the way we ask a question. So we tend to go up at the end of a question. The other thing is, if we're making a list of, if there's a comma in the middle of a sentence, right? There's a thing we do where we want the person to keep listening. So we go up. It's like, I'm still talking. I have more to say. I'm going up. Whereas if I finish a sentence, I go down. The sentence is finished. I'm done. I'm done saying what I want to say. So if I'm cutting in the middle of a sentence where someone's gone up, it does not sound good.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because you brought that to my attention. But when you're teaching language, and as you said yourself, you're bilingual, do you see people's personalities shift when they're learning a new language or when they're speaking different languages?
Yes, I mean I see that in myself. So I definitely feel different when I speak. Polish is now my second language, so I'm not as comfortable. And I left Poland when I was 10, which means I kind of left with a 10-year-old level of Polish, which is, like that's adequate. But when it comes to speaking about, I don't know, complicated feelings or politics or news events, like there's a lot missing. And plus, then I didn't speak it for 35 years. And so going back to Poland, living in Poland for 4 years, gave me my kind of a little bit more fluency back, but I'm still immensely uncomfortable. And so it's like I'm pushing myself all the time, going, yes, you can do it. You can do it. Keep going. You can do it. That's really taxing. And so then it really feeds back into when I'm teaching, I have to accept that that's what's happening for everyone that I teach, that they are not really themselves. They don't feel like 100% like the person that they've experienced themselves normally to be. It's a constant effort and it's enormously taxing. So the personality shift tends to be more like, I think people become a lot more formal. You can sense that it's an effort.
Yeah.
Speaking a second language, it's enormously taxing.
They're thinking about every word they
Yeah.
say. And I remember a good friend of ours here in Sydney, and she's Italian. And, she said to me when she first came to Australia, she didn't have much English. And she said, I'm really funny in Italy.
Yeah.
She felt like she was a really funny person in her native language. But in Australia, she doesn't regard herself as a funny person when she's talking, to someone who's British or, well, someone who's speaking English.
Yeah, so I'm the same. Like, I feel like a 10-year-old in a way. Like, when I go to Polish, I do feel like a little kid. And I find that, I guess in my students, like I say, they become sort of less chill because they're going, do a good job, like keep going, you can do it.
And we probably actually do often experience that in our own native language anyway. If we think of perhaps at work or business, if you're doing a presentation or you might feel that you have to speak in a certain way or use the correct grammar English as you're speaking, even in your own native, you probably have that in a head of like, don't mess this up or phrase that in the correct way.
It's fascinating, actually, the idea of the different types of language that we use in different contexts anyway, as you say, like in a business context and at the pub with your friends.
Yeah. What have you observed between different cultures through your teachers? Perhaps different nuances or inflections or different just language styles that happen in different cultures around the world?
Yes, so this is super, super interesting. So in Poland, there's a lot less niceties. There's no how are you? You don't say how are you. If you ask someone how they are, it's like, why are you asking me that? That's very personal. That's a personal question. There's no showing interest. So whereas you or I would go, oh, wow, oh, really? Oh, gosh, yeah, that happened to a friend of mine. Oh, my goodness. In Poland, if you do that, people think that they'll go, sorry, what? Right? So going over there as a native English speaker and trying to feel comfortable in the culture, like I had to start being very direct. No, how are you is a shock. If you imagine going into a shop and not saying, hello, how are you? Right? Like it's super disconcerting. Or when you first meet someone, you can't say that. So
what do you say? Just silence.
Like you get down to business straight away.
Yeah.
I would ask people for advice. Like, I've met someone at a gallery and what do we talk about? Like, I can't say, how are you? They'll be like, you point to the artwork and you say, do you like this artwork? Like, just straight into it.
So it's like there's no small talk, no fluff.
I teach small talk. Small talk is a thing that I teach. Like, I help people with dinner conversations. What do you say? You've been seated next to someone at a dinner. What do you say? How do you talk to them? And it's really amazing because I do find that my Polish, for example, and German students, they'll feel very uncomfortable with small talk. Like to them, it seems like a waste of time or almost dishonest. Like, why aren't we just saying what we mean? Like, what's all this for?
Yes.
And so, yeah, when you turn that around, you think, wow, there's so many people here from different cultures. How are they experiencing Australia? Do you know, like when you travel, like, yeah, it's really incredible. Just
Yeah.
the assumption that like, oh, it's all the same everywhere. People just say, how are you everywhere, and there's small talk everywhere. It's just really not that way.
And before we get into some of the more podcast related questions, is there anything you've learned from editing conversations that has changed the way you teach or use language yourself?
Yeah, probably how to get to the point, like expressing yourself. So a few of the lessons I have at the moment, I actually help people make the point in a clearer, simpler way. So what we tend to do, especially if we're not used to it, sometimes because it's a second language, we just kind of talk, right? Like words just come out, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And the listeners, they're going, where are they going? What's happening?
I think I'm one of these people anyway,
No,
that I just talk.
But I think we all do. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's made me realize I'm probably not even doing it right now, but how to be concise and pause and think about what you want to say. And then say, it's fine to pause. It's okay to say, let me think about that, rather than just letting it all kind of pour out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good reminder. And I often forget myself to pause and take a breath, whether it's on this podcast or just in normal life or, conversations. I forget that myself. But moving into the world of podcasts, because we wanted to give a bit of a behind the scenes in a way to people listening. When I first launched the podcast, I edited the episodes myself, and it was a really useful exercise. So I got to really hear what was coming through on the microphone, but it was obviously very time consuming, and I knew I'd need to get someone else involved in it, which was obviously yourself. And I thought we'd go through a bit of the process that, originally 2 years ago, I started recording them on Google Meet, and then we moved to using this Riverside platform, which we're still using now. And I'll record it with each guest. I'll pretty much listen back, write back any of my editing notes, and which is often me saying, Gosia, remove the ums, the ahs, the repetitions and things like that. And I'll give that to you to actually then edit. So can you talk us through from a little bit of your process, a bit of what happens on your end when it comes to actually editing a podcast?
Sure. So you give me notes with time codes, which is super useful. And then I start from the end and I go to the time codes and I look at what you've asked me to do with sort of a margin start to finish, so that I'm not completely lost. Like, I know what the sentence is at a minimum, right? Generally, it's like I get a general sense of what's going on. And, often it'll just be an or an ah, which is really quick. And sometimes I have to make sense of something, which will take me a little bit of time. And the reason I do it backwards is because if I were to go forwards, the time codes would change as I edited, right? So the only way to make sense of that would be to go through and put markers in, which would still take me a while to do. So it actually makes sense to go from end to start. And then I go from start to finish myself and put through any other edits that, any extra ums or ahs, any things that are redundant, like pauses, repetition. Sometimes people start a sentence and it doesn't go anywhere, and we can remove that really easily. That actually doesn't happen as often. It's mostly pauses and ums, obviously, those
some of
kinds
my
of things
keywords.
Hey, everyone's got keywords. I can't wait to see what my keywords are.
And because that blew my mind when you said, and I didn't really know for probably quite a lot of our episodes that you edited them backwards, and I was like, whoa, that is crazy. Probably because I did start with, as you said, when I was doing the editing myself, it was putting in markers and then going back. And I was forever trying to think which is the most efficient and effective way of doing this editing. And the people listening, or if anyone has edited something themselves, they might do different ways as well. And we have dabbled with the AI function. So obviously now we're AI for everything right now, but there is an option in the platform where we can see the transcript and you can almost highlight words and just delete them, which again is mind blowing because then they're removed from the audio track. But tell us from your perspective, we did find a few problems with that.
Yeah, so what will happen sometimes is it's just not extra super precise, which means you'll cut a word and it'll take out some microseconds of the following word, and it just there's no way for the editor to make that up. Like I would then need to go back to the original recording, try and find that missing start of the word to put it back in. So I mean, I'm guessing, like logically, if you're cutting a whole section and there's quite a pause, a reasonable amount of pause at the start and the end, it would work fine. It's really just when things are running into each other. The other thing that Riverside won't know is what I was saying before about intonation. So you've got the text there, it seems fine to just cut in the middle of a sentence. But if you've gone up in the middle of the sentence, it's going to sound super weird. That's when you need an editor to go, I'll sometimes make an executive decision like, Amy, we can't cut that.
Yeah.
Because I've got nothing. I can't make that up with something else. It just doesn't sound right. So, but yeah, I guess AI will get there eventually. It'll be able to pick up on intonation, I'm guessing, in the future.
And some of it was removing, I remember, laughter as well. So if there was a bit of laughter or general agreement, it highlighted them as just, filler words that needed to be removed. So then you start to lose some of that tone and human elements of conversation.
Yes. If you want there to be a natural flow, like a natural conversational flow, you can't cut every redundancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you edit for yourself, it'll be interesting when you edit this one. We're our own worst critic. When you're hearing yourself speak, when you're hearing yourself, and I remember when we first started doing these together, you were saying to me, Amy, I don't really hear that. I don't notice that you've said and saying ums is also part of normal speech as well. So if you go too hard on cutting every single out, you're just going to sound robotic as well. What's something most people don't realize about editing a podcast, do you think?
Just how we run things together, and we'll start a thought and just go somewhere else. The biggest thing, this is from listening to podcasts too, we don't notice all the mistakes that we make, and sometimes we don't hear them. So like we don't hear a mistake that someone else has made either. So I'll be listening to a podcast and I'll listen to the podcast a second time, not this one, but let's say a different one, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, they didn't say on the corner of the street, they said on the street of the corner, and it's only on the second listen that I'll pick up on it, So yeah, it's really amazing. Your brain your brain is an editor, actually. It's really clever at editing things so they just sound really seamless. It's not until you start editing yourself where you go, oh my gosh, it's all these mistakes. Yeah.
That is so interesting. That is really, when you say the brain is the editor, it sort of it fills up it fills in the gaps of what you sort of expect them to say or what you think they're talking about.
Yes.
How do you keep a balance when you are doing editing between that natural flow of conversation and making it sound polished?
Yeah, so like I was saying, you don't remove all the ums. You definitely don't try to take the ums that are connected to other words unless it's, look, I have done that. It's really time consuming and it's not always necessary. So, if someone was to say, and it's difficult to get rid of the R. So yeah, just don't cut out too much. Obviously, you can get rid of a lot of pausing. So that's something that you can do. If someone is saying all of the time, and some of us do that, sometimes we're a bit more tired. I just did it then. You need more
Yeah.
time to think. It's actually really difficult not to say or constantly.
And especially in this environment, because I
Yeah.
always say the conversations I often have with people before we hit record and a bit after are totally natural, totally fluid. We're
Right.
not saying and ahs, but we know currently we are recording this. And
Yes.
it adds as this sort of just layer of pressure where you feel that when you're responding to a question, you've got to get it really perfect. Or when I'm asking the questions, it's got to really sound, succinct and clear. And the more you're trying to do that is almost more when I make the the ahs, the knows as I go along. If someone listening was thinking about starting a podcast, what should they consider before they even hit record?
I actually think you need certain skills. I guess it depends what kind of podcast you'd like to do. There's obviously different kinds, like really scripted ones where it's just someone reading out a script. Interviews, though, you need really good interview skills. You need really good organization. Like, I think it's a lot of work, as you know. It's a lot of work to get guests together, to get the structure right, to write up your question, to the editing aspect, the uploading aspect. So you need to be really well organized. Recording stuff, so recording equipment. You need relatively good soundproofing, probably a really good mic. Echoes are a thing.
I remember one of the times when I recorded in our office and it had a real echo to it. And even though I had put down cushions and a throw and other bits and bobs, when you heard that episode, you said to me, Amy, have you recorded this somewhere different?
Yes.
And you knew straight away. Yeah. And I was like, oh, yes, I have. Why?
Yeah.
But I think you did say some things you can fix in obviously with your skill set, with your editing skills, some stuff you can fix. What are the things that, you can't fix in the back end if the recording's not great?
I can't fix an echo. So if obviously Riverside is wonderful because you've got two separate tracks. So if one person is quieter than the other, I can bring up the sound so that they're not as quiet. But echo, that's an echo on your end. I can't fix an echo. If it's a really poor quality mic, I can't make that sound better. It's just going to sound crunchy and weird. Bad internet connection, that's another thing. Really need to have a good
I know I've had pain points with internet along the journey of this podcast for sure. Yes. I mean, really, if I think now over the last 2 years, crikey, I have recorded episodes from friend's spare bedroom in LA to the mother-in-law's house to our home to other office spaces. Wow. And really total different locations. And most of this year have all been in this studio that I've been coming to try and keep some of that stuff consistent. But also keeping the podcast going bi-weekly. And if we've been traveling or if guests are getting people's availability, sometimes you just think, well, I've got to do this here.
I've got to say one more thing. The thing that I noticed too is consistency. So I would choose a setup and stick to the setup, because when you record with really different equipment and really different soundproofing, it's quite obvious to the listener. So they'll be like, oh, that sounds really different this week. Why is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if I listened back to some of my various episodes, I would probably really start to notice a difference. But something you can't control is the guest's environment.
Sure.
And they often are actually at home themselves.
Yeah. So one thing that I have noticed is sometimes there's a bounce back of the sound. So your audio will appear in their space because if they're not using headphones and a mic, the sound is appearing in their space and feeding back into their audio. So,
That's interesting to know as well. What do you think makes a podcast episode really work? You mentioned you listen to a lot of other podcasts as well, and you're involved in this one. So what do you think makes an episode work?
Just that it's relevant to your audience. So if it's a history podcast, that it's about history and the details that you get into are relevant to what the listeners are interested in. Like I said, really good organization and well scripted content, that it gets to the point.
Can't say mine necessarily does do that.
Of course it does. No, 100%. I haven't ever really listened to a terrible podcast. I feel like people who do podcasting, I think they sort of have the podcasting skills. Like I think they know that about themselves.
What's one thing you've learned from working on Really Good Conversations?
Just how insanely inspiring people are and how many inspiring people there are in the world. Like every episode, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you learn something new, and just how important it is to have conversations with people.
Yeah, because unless we have these conversations, you don't know these stories of what people going on in their world, or their journey that they've gone through.
Exactly.
Do you have, I'm putting you on the spot here, but do you have a favourite episode or moment that you remember that stands out from?
I do. Luke Cook
was
really amazing. Like the story, just the things that he went through and how he just was able to overcome and keep going and be so positive and successful. Like, yeah, and he was just so honest about everything that happened to him.
Yeah.
Teared up a good few times. It was amazing. But I mean, everybody I think that comes on, there'll be something about the interviewer. I'll go, oh my gosh, I never thought to think about it in that way.
Yeah.
Or, oh, how inspiring.
Yeah, no, I love that. Oh, that's great. And what kind of conversations do you think the world needs more of?
I wish that we could be more honest about our points of view. I feel like that's just disappearing from the world. I think it's something we might have talked about a couple of times. We just, there's a lot of polarization and we get stuck in our filter bubbles and we're just disconnected, and people are scared to, maybe not scared, but like uncomfortable to express like differing points of view. So just honesty. And I also, I think something that I notice in Australia, which is always surprising to me, is that people who are culturally different we don't mix as much as we could be. Like it's a really multicultural place, and there's a lot of disconnection here in Australia. So I don't know too much about, like, I've never lived in America or somewhere else where there's many, many cultures that are kind of, there's a melting pot.
That's an interesting point. And I'd probably say, London is obviously such a melting pot of different cultures, but also in reality, people don't speak to each other. So people are on the tube and on the train. And I remember one of the first times I was like going down to London to meet Alex, and I sat on the tube and I said hi to the person next to me. And Alex was like, what are you doing? And I was like, what? Well, we're from the north, we chat to anyone who was like, you're in London now, we don't talk to each other. I mean, that was many, many years ago, maybe like 20 years ago almost. So things might have changed a bit more since then. But to be honest, on the commute, which I used to do, then no, you're not really speaking to anyone.
Yes.
Anyway, Gosia, thank you so much for sharing some of just that insights and experience that you have from that language communication work that you do and everything that you do on the podcast. Couldn't do it without you, and you are an integral person to getting this out there and relieves such a level of pain and stress of me having to actually do all of the editing. So it is such a crucial job, absolutely. But I'm going to ask you on the spot some of the questions from one of our packs before we conclude. So I've picked for you from the Really Good Conversations for Kids Volume 2 packs. So I thought, what has she heard? What has she heard? What hasn't she heard? But so question number 1, what 3 things would you take to a desert island and why?
Sherlock Holmes short stories. Never got sick of that. I wanted to be Sherlock Holmes as a child.
Wow.
Seriously, like he's just the ultimate. Okay, what else? I want to say popcorn machine, but I can't take popcorn. Guitar. My guitar, of course. How big's the island?
I'm not too sure. You could any a sort of deserted island.
My bike. So I'm
Oh.
hoping it's not just sand and it's really tiny. But I think even then, I think I just go around and around.
I was thinking
Yeah.
sand in my head, and I do remember many years ago, I can't think where we were, and Alex and I went on a bike ride of Summer Island, and yeah, half of it had a path, a pavement, and then the rest was just sand. So
Right.
trying to push the bikes through sand
It's not that much fun.
was not the best idea,
Yeah.
but awesome. That's great. Question number 2. If you could be any age for a day, what age would you choose and why?
Okay, so I reckon I'd be 33 because I think I was a bit of a fool in my 20s. And when I was a teenager, it's not worth even talking about. 33, I feel, is like you're still young, you're very fit, and your body can do lots of cool stuff, but you're sort of, I don't know, smart enough to know what's going on. And I would definitely, just not party as much and do heaps of, I don't know, adventuring on my bike. And
Brilliant. Love that. And question number 3. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Ooh. Italy, yes, Italy for sure. I think I'd go all over. I've been there a few times and I'm learning Italian as well. I've always been obsessed with Italy, but I've never done the south properly. So I'd probably go down south first and do like Sicily and then just travel my way up.
Nice.
So
Can I come too? I'd like to do that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. We'll do a podcast from the road. That would be
Amazing.
Great. Yeah, we'll just talk to Italian people.
Yeah, we could just do a series of really, really good conversations on tour.
So good.
However, I think you've got better bilingual skills than I have. I think I'm a little bit stuck in English.
That's cool. Yeah, we'll get
you might be able to teach me.
Yeah.
You could teach me another language.
Totally.
And the final guest, Gosia, that I love to ask all of our guests is, if you could ask any person, dead or alive, a question, who would it be and what would you ask them?
For me, I think one of my big heroes is Patti Smith. Patti Smith is really amazing. I don't know if you've read the book Just Kids that she wrote. She basically at one point just decided to be an artist. She said, this is just what I'm going to do, and just had this unshakable belief in herself. And I would ask her, did she ever experience self-doubt? Like, did she ever have low moments where she thought, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, I'm young, I'm not making much money, like what is all this for? And what she did to overcome that. Yeah.
Love it. Brilliant. That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today and everything that you have shared. How can our listeners find out more about some of your work, your art, or connect with you?
Yeah, so my art website is gosialapinski.com. And you can find me on Instagram.
Excellent, Gosia. I'll include those links in the show notes. And thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on today's guests. And if really good conversations are your thing, hit subscribe and join us next time for more business journeys, insights and banter.